In this video, I'm going to cover setting up image planes for modeling reference in Maya. You can use drawings, photographs, whatever you want as reference. It just needs to align to one of these views. So ideally, you'd have an image in each one of these views, but realistically, you only really need something, let's say for instance, in the top, which would cover the X and the Z, and then the side, that which covers Z and Y. So that way you have X, Y, and Z covered with just two images. But if you can find a front view also, then that just gives you a little bit of redundancy and another image just to look at from a different point of view on whatever it is that you're modeling. So find as much model reference as you possibly can. I looked up this Bentley and I just added blueprint to my search and came up with these blueprints here, which are going to be really useful for setting this model up. I also got other views that aren't directly usable as image planes, like I really can't model to this, but this is a really useful view nonetheless. Take for instance the way this headlight attaches right here. So if you were only modeling this car using these blueprints, then notice you can't really see how the contours work and how the headlight joins into that fender. The fender blocks the view to the light here, and the light itself blocks what's happening with how it attaches to the car here. So there's nothing in this that really tells me how that needs to fit. So I need to have these other views available to me. Even though I can't use them directly in Maya, I need to have them so I can see how things fit together properly. But for the images that are actually going to go directly into Maya, this came as one image with all four pieces on there, so I need to break that up into four separate images. So I just went ahead and did that in Photoshop and named them appropriately. And the last thing that I need to check before I import these into Maya is, do they align to what Maya expects as the where the axes are. So for example, the top-down view is X positive comes out to screen right, and then Z positive goes down. And typically when you model in Maya, you want to model with the front of your object facing Z positive. So if you look at it from the side, for example, Z positive is going to the left. And if I look at it from the front, I'm looking actually down the Z positive, so I'm looking negative, and I'll look at the front of my object. That way all these terms sort of agree with what you're setting up model-wise. You don't have to adhere to that, it just makes life easier. So in order to make that happen, I want sort of the driver side of my car over here, the American driver side, and the front of the car pointing down, and then in the side view, the front of the car should be pointing left. So I'll just check that in Photoshop. So the front and back, those are totally fine. The side view does in fact have the front pointing to the left, so that view is good. But the top view, the front of the car is actually pointing left, so that won't work by default. So I need to go ahead and make a change here. So I'll just do image rotation, and then rotate that around, and then just resave that image. You can use any type of image you want. I choose PNG just because they're lossless compression, but you could use JPEGs, Targas, TIFFs, whatever Maya accepts there. And then to go ahead and bring those in, you can use this little icon right here. So each view has its own place that you would look that up. This is a good point to make sure that you have your project set. I actually do have mine set, so here is my project setting. If you don't, just click Set Project, go to the folder where you want to be working, and then just set the project there. If you've never had a project set in that directory, it'll ask you if you want to set up default workspace. Typically just say yes. So I'm going to go ahead and grab the top view from here. I'll do the same thing on the side, and then for the front and the back. Now on the back view, if I try to click this again, it'll just turn that image plane on and off. So this switch is really just for the first image plane that you load up. So what you need to do for all additional images are view, image plane, import image. And this way you can load as many as you want in there. In this case, I'll load back. Okay, so I'll just maximize this view for a second. So here you can see a few problems. One, we got this flickering going on between the front and the back where they're sharing the same space. Obviously we don't want that. And then the scale difference. So from the front the car looks humongous, the back it looks humongous, and the side and the top sort of agree with each other. So there's another problem here, which is if I were to add a cube, for example, I can't see my whole cube because my image planes are in my way. So there's one way you could do this where you would go into the attribute editor for an image and just turn its image plane attribute to looking through camera, and that'll just make that side image disappear. Okay, the problem with this is if I do that, it looks fine here in the perspective view, but let's say for instance I select that vert right there, and now I go over to the side view. So where's my selection? Why can't I see my my manipulator? The reason is the image plane is still in the way, it's just not in the way in this view. So hopefully that makes sense. I'll just bring it up here to show you again. So let me go ahead and turn that back to all views, and so now you can see that that is actually obscuring. That's why I can't see my manipulator here, because this plane is actually obscuring the manipulator. So what you want to do is you want to select the image plane itself, and to move image planes around, you can't just sort of move them around the way you do typical objects in Maya. You actually have to drive them through virtual sliders or entering numbers manually. So what I'll do is I'll go over here to the channel box, select my side camera, which you can do just view, select camera, and I'll pull down to image plane here, and then these values here, these center values, this is what I want to do to offset this thing. So by default, the camera is on this side looking this way, and so I want to move the model reference behind where I'm actually modeling. Hopefully that makes sense. That way it's just not interfering with modeling operations. So I'll grab center X, you can see it's the X axis, and then I'll just move it back. So notice over here there's no change. I can move that thing really close to the camera or really far away, and it doesn't change scale. Again, orthographic views do not incorporate any perspective into their view whatsoever. So I can move this thing a long ways back and it will look exactly the same in this view. Again, the advantage here is now no matter what I do, as far as making a selection here, I'll be able to see my manipulator because the image plane isn't blocking it. So that's the first thing you want to do, is just go through each of your views and move the image plane back out of the way. And you can move the image plane back a really long way. Basically what you want to do is move it back far enough that it's never going to interfere with your modeling operations. And there's one more thing to keep in mind that I'll demonstrate with the front and back images that is just easier to do with that instead of the side, since I only have one side view here. So I'll go ahead and select my front camera, and then I'll grab image plane 3, which is my front, center on Z, and shift that. So now as I move this forward, notice like it switches to the back because now the front image is behind the back image, and now the front end image is here. So even though this is the front image, I actually want to push it behind the model, and hopefully that makes perfect sense, because right now I can't even see. Here's my my cube. I can't even see it in the front view at all because the image plane is obscuring the model. So I want to move whatever view it is to the opposite side that that view is representing. So the front of the camera, I'm sorry, the front of the object needs to move behind the object, so that this way the front view of the object. Sorry, that was unintentionally complicated. So that moves to this side, to the back side, because it's the front view, and I want the model to be in front of the image plane. So with image plane 4, which is my back view, again I'm working on Z. I'll just move that this direction. And notice what I have now is the back is obscuring what's going on with the model. So what you want to do is push your back image plane far enough back, and look here. So as soon as you get past that camera, now you see what's happening here. As soon as you get past the camera, you see the cube unobstructed, and my image plane is back out of the way. So this looks like this would work pretty well. So now I can see just the front of the car, and everything's good. Then I would want to flip this thing around. So I'll go to View, Predefined Bookmarks, and flip to the back. Notice now the camera comes to this side, and instead of seeing the back image plane in the cube, I'm actually seeing the front of the car. So the image plane isn't far enough back. So this is just one thing you want to do when you do your setup, is move it beyond where your camera is, but not so far that it goes beyond where your clipping plane is. So in this case, like I could go to negative 500 and that'd be fine. It's totally out of the way. And this guy too, send him out to 500, totally out of the way. This way now I can go back and forth between these predefined bookmarks, flip to the front, and now I'm looking at the front of the car, and then flip to the back, and now I got the back of the car. So in both cases, the image planes are just out of the way. And again, they're just way back in space now. So I'll just input those same basic values to these other ones. So I want this to move back. I'll just use 500 as an example here. Same with the top one, don't want that interfering, so I'll just move that down on Y. So again, that's way on down there, and it's just way out of the way. So now I can work on my model unobscured in any view. The last thing I'd want to do with the image planes here is just turn them off in this view, and probably rename them also. So let me go ahead and select this one, go to my attribute editor, and just turn this switch on for each one of the image planes. So looking through camera, and notice that it just disappears from the perspective view. It's really of no use to you in the perspective view. It's only of use in the view that you added that image plane to. So on the side view, I want to see this. I don't want to see it in any other view at all. So I'll just do that. I'll select the camera on each one of these and just set them to only through the camera. Okay, so that should take care of it. I can sort of tumble around and make sure they're all gone. They are. And then I still have my cameras hanging out here, and I don't want to accidentally select cameras. I just find them irritating to be visible, so I just display, hide cameras, and get them out of the way. And incidentally, that is a bug that I've seen in Maya where sometimes you won't be able to see an image plane, and you just have to hide the camera. Sometimes if a camera is visible, then you will not be able to see the image plane. I have no idea why that is, or why that would be sort of a desired thing. That's why I think it's just a bug. And it doesn't always show up, it just sometimes that's the way it is. So that's it. The image planes are now set up properly so that I can model to them, except for I still have the scale issue. So let me flip back to the front here. So in order to take care of the scale problem, what I typically do is put some sort of primitive out. In this case, I already have this cube, so I'll just scale that up. And I'll just make sure that I can see this well. So I want to scale this up so that it basically hits the back bumper and the front bumper, the top of the car and the bottom of the car. So I'll just shift this around at this point until it looks the way I want it to. So it looks like this actually cuts off, the wheels are cut off very slightly, so I'm just going to make it go just a little bit further than I normally would. Something like that might be about where the ground would be. And then this gets very slightly longer, something like that. So now this establishes my volume for Y and Z, but not for X, only for Y and Z. Then I'll go up to the top view here, and since I already have a Z dimension established, and this top view uses Z and X, then I want to make sure that my image basically matches up in Z first. So it looks like I can move it down very slightly. See, the front of the bumper is not quite at the front, and the back is just a little bit beyond. So I'll go ahead and select the camera, pull down to the top image, and then I'm going to use this center, and again it's going to be center on Z. So I'm just going to drive that forward. I'm going to use control and middle click and drag. That gives me a little finer degree of control over the virtual sliders. And that looks pretty good. Now it's touching there and it's touching in the back. So now the top view and the side view agree with each other in terms of scale. So now what I would want to do in this view is scale the box up to match the width. So I'll just scale that out till it touches the fender on each side. And it's very slightly wrong, it looks like in this case. Those fenders look pretty good. Back here there's a little bit of a discrepancy. This may be just a drawing thing, or it may be a slight image alignment issue, and I could go back into Photoshop and potentially straighten this out or something, but that's pretty close. So that looks pretty good, and now I get to the front. And the front is way wrong, which we knew right from the start. But this is now an established volume. I have, in this view, I can trust my Y and my Z are set up properly, and then I have a Z dimension here that matches and an X that matches, which means I have now established a volume that's X, Y, and Z. This is the size of the car, which means for the front, I just need to make sure that the front fits into this volume. I don't want to change the size of the box at all at this point. So now I'm just changing the size of the actual image itself. So I'll go to the front image, width and height, and just scale that down. And this one is going to be a little bit tricky because of perspective. So now notice that I've scaled it down. The fenders are touching in width, but it's not even close in height. Like the tires aren't anywhere near the bottom, and the top is pretty close, but it's not anywhere near close. What's happening here is something you have to keep in mind when you use images as reference. This is perspective at work. So basically, the things that are closer to the camera appear larger. And the wider angle lens, the more that is the case. So in this case, the fenders look like they're really wide compared to, the doors on the car or something like that. And again, that's just perspective making things that are distant look a little bit smaller. Orthographic views, like what we're looking through here, have no perspective whatsoever. So ideally you want drawings that don't take into consideration any perspective, but that's sort of a difficult thing to do. One thing to keep in mind is if you are taking your own reference images, or you can find reference images that use a telephoto lens, that will help a great deal because telephoto lenses tend to compress space. So the depth feels a lot sort of shallower in telephoto. So see here how the background appears relative to her versus this picture here. There's tons of depth here, and in here everything's compressed up. In here you can see it feels like her nose is more pronounced, and over here it feels like it's flatter to her face. So again, that distortion and that depth perception is much, much deeper in a wide-angle lens than it is in telephoto. So if you can find telephoto reference of things, that's going to align much better to orthographic views. But sort of regardless, you always have to make the decision, is a view trustworthy or not? In this case, this is not a trustworthy view. I can use this view to establish the relationship between where the grill is and the lights, everything that's basically on this common plane. But I can't use it for instance, for modeling this part of the car because it's actually not skinny like this. This top part of the car is not much skinnier than the front of this, right? This is just perspective at work. So I'm going to flip this around to the back and take a look at what that guy looks like. And again, I'll just scale this down. Okay, so the back is much better about fitting. So what I'm going to do is I'm just going to sort of pick somewhere in the middle where it's pretty close, and I'll just offset this where it looks like the top and bottom, it's very close actually from the back. And this is also easy to explain thinking about perspective. So look how long that hood is compared to the trunk. So if you have someone at the front of this drawing it or taking a picture or whatever, it's going to really exaggerate the amount of perspective shift when you see this part versus this versus here to here. So again, long, so that means this is going to be much smaller versus in the back view here. See how close those things are together. So that's why the back view is more trustworthy in this particular case. So what I want to do here is just try to set this up to some reasonable guess as to how big it should be, and then as I start modeling this thing, I'll see from the top view, for instance, how big a light is and exactly where it's going to be positioned. So for instance, here I can see pretty clearly if I added a light here, I'd be able to see did it align here or not, and I might just need to sort of make this image larger or smaller to accommodate whatever this says it should be in terms of placement and size. And then I can trust this view for relative sizes of like the grill versus these two lights versus the blinker or whatever that thing is. So for the front here, I'll go ahead and scale that up a bit, and then I'll probably just move that down. So something like that is probably closer to what it actually should be, where the fenders are coming out a little wide. These are probably pretty close to where they're supposed to be, but again, I would refine that as I continued on with this model. So at this point, your image planes are completely set up and reliable. And the important thing here is the flipping around back and forth. If you have two different side images, your object is really different from left to right, for example, then you can use the predefined bookmarks here to jump from the left side to the right side of the object. This is pretty convenient method, just so you just have all of the image plane business that you need, but it's completely out of your way. So flipping to the back just gives me the back view, flipping to the front just gives me the front view, and you don't have to go in and turn off each image plane depending on what view you're looking at. So that should pretty much do it. I'll go over modeling tools themselves in another video.